Now that the previous video established the early success of Mario, already by the first installment, the Mario formula was proven to be a success. And as long as Nintendo didn't screw up, Mario would remain consistently successful. Thankfully, because the Mario team are a handful of talented people, the next step for the franchise would ultimately lead to the release of Super Mario Bros. 3. Mario 3 would see sweeping quality of life changes, involving every aspect of what came previously, which is why I believe Mario 3 to be the culmination of the NES trilogy, because it was able to evolve what Mario 1 established and avoid the pitfalls both versions of Mario 2 suffered from. Before we get started, I'd like to first go over my history with Mario 3. Because unlike the other games covered on the channel, I have a personal history with Mario 3 that dates back to Super Mario Advance 4 on the GBA. Back in the mid-2000s, I used to own a Game Boy Advance SP, and during that time, Nintendo would port a lot of their older NES/SNES games on the GBA. The first games my parents purchased were Super Mario Advance 4 and Zelda 2. This would actually be my first exposure to Mario and Zelda for the first time. Either way, I remember booting up Advance 4 and seeing the opening with Mario and Luigi. Then as I began playing, I managed to complete World 1, to then immediately put the game down, because I wanted to return to World 1. Yeah, you see, I never ended up beating Advance 4, because my 5-year-old brain was on autopilot the whole time. And nowadays I have no idea where my GBA is. But I figured I'd share that story, because when writing the script, I wanted to reminisce my history with Mario 3 before diving in. So with that story over, let's begin Super Mario Bros. 3. So like previously when discussing the development of a game, I like to always set the stage for how the game was created. By the late 80s, Nintendo had cemented themselves as the prominent company for video games, thanks to the success of the NES. I've already gone into detail about the NES in my previous Mario videos, so I'll save my breath and move on. However, it should be brought to attention how much of a presence Nintendo had on pop culture at the time. They were not afraid to market their characters in a variety of things. Obviously you had the games, which were the main attraction, but you also had branded cereal, cartoons, and a feature movie I'll mention in a moment. Mario 3 also got an animated series, and the storylines always followed the same premise of fighting Bowser. As for the quality of the show, let's just say the more I listen to Mario, the more I appreciate Chris Pratt. Regardless, Mario by that point had already cemented himself as a pop culture icon, and after 3 installments, ignoring different localizations, fans were eager for what would come next. They wouldn't have to wait for long, because the Mario team began immediate work on the next installment after the release of Lost Levels. During the early stages of development, the original idea was to make Mario 3's gameplay a bird's-eye view perspective, similar to the original Legend of Zelda, but the idea was abandoned because it was confusing to determine where Mario was at a given time, so perspective was shifted back to the traditional side-scroller, which was honestly a wise decision. When reading that story for the first time, it reminded me of how in the original Dragon Quest, the player character's sprite only looked in one direction, and it could make talking to certain NPCs confusing to say the least. So now that development shifted to a more traditional style, the Mario team's next challenge was wondering how they were going to shake up the formula. Thankfully, under the leadership of Takashi Tezuka, who you'll remember worked on Mario 1 and Lost Levels, decided that Mario 3 should from the top down rework everything. And yes, I mean everything. Tezuka wanted Mario 3 to be a breath of fresh air, expanding on what was previously established. And looking at the finished product, it clearly shows. One of the first improvements made was the amount of pixels displayed at a given time. Mario's sprite was vastly improved once Mario 3 released, and it's one of my favorite portrayals of him. Once again, Koji Kondo returns to compose the soundtrack, this time composing brand new songs to fit the higher production this time around. And after 2 years in development, Super Mario Bros. 3 was released in Japan in 1988. Remembering what I said a minute ago about a movie, in 1989 a movie called The Wizard released about a young boy named Jimmy who competes in a video game tournament. I won't go in depth into the movie. At the end of the day, the film is not something to write home about. It essentially served as glorified marketing for Nintendo's products. There's this one scene where one of the kids plays Rad Racer with the Power Glove, which was an accessory meant to serve as a controller by using the sensors built into the gloves. It sounded like a great idea, except the Power Glove was notorious for not even working. To set it up, you had to input a code specifically meant for the game you wanted to play. I honestly feel bad for the kids who begged their parents to buy something that barely worked. It shows that we're all susceptible to marketing, and I say this as a 2000s kid who bought everything SpongeBob related. Either way, once Jimmy reaches the tournament, he goes through a gauntlet of challenges culminating in the final round with the unveiling of Mario 3. Now for being the first time this kid played Mario 3, he sure knew where all the secrets were. Like how he was able to know where the hidden flute is beyond me. But this marked the first time Western audiences would get their first glimpse of Mario 3, and in 1990, Super Mario Bros. 3 was released in North America. It was definitely a bold move considering how this was done in an era before the internet where the only way to find out about new releases were from magazines or commercials. And it helped because Super Mario Bros. 3 would go on to sell 11 million copies in North America and Japan. So now that I've gone over the history of Mario 3, I say it's time we get into the game proper, shall we? With peace restored to the Mushroom Kingdom thanks to the efforts of Mario and Luigi, it is quickly disrupted when Bowser sent his 7 children the Koopalings to steal the magic wands of the 7 kingdoms in order to cause chaos by transforming each of their monarchs into animals. The Mario Bros then set off on their new adventure to retrieve the wands and restore peace to the lands. So I think the best place to begin is to go over the sweeping quality of life changes made this time around. Honestly, the amount of things changed or introduced gives such a breath of fresh air to Mario 3, because by lost levels, you could see if improvements weren't made, then Mario would run the risk of wearing out its welcome. To get off track, that problem was what the new series suffered from. While the games were faithful to the formula, they suffered from a lack of identity and boring level design. You can always determine the quality of a Mario game based on how good the level design is. Case in point with Mario 3, from the moment you begin the game, it clearly demonstrates the improvements made from the original. For starters, the updated art style gives so much more life to the different worlds and levels you traverse. By modern standards, while the graphics in Mario 1 were colorful at the time, thanks to the added pixel count in Mario 3 is by far the best looking out of the NES installments. The added color palette also helps make the pixels pop. I've already mentioned how this rendition of Mario is one of my favorites, but some of my favorite worlds visually have to go to worlds 3, 6, and 8. There's also this theater aesthetic Mario 3 has, where when you complete a stage, it has Mario running off screen like a play, and it's also shown in the title screen. All credit to Tezuka, because without its vision, Mario 3 would have suffered from looking too familiar. Now, to really get into how the gameplay and presentation have changed, the most prominent feature introduced in Mario 3 is the Overworld. When you complete a level, you no longer transition to the next stage. Now you utilize the Overworld in between levels, and Mario 3 will highlight which stage is next based on the tile. Throughout your adventure, you'll come across locked doors and boulders that block your path, unless you meet certain requirements or have a certain item. Locked doors are unlocked once you complete a fortress level, and to break boulders you'll need the hammer item. The reason they exist is because if you get a game over, you can use the unlocked shortcuts to avoid having to replay levels. You'll also come across toad houses scattered throughout the overworld where you can play mini-games to earn prizes. It's always recommended to stop by in between levels because you might find a useful item that'll be stored in your inventory. Speaking of the inventory, by pressing the B button in the overworld you can select a power-up or item to use. It's fantastic when you need an upgrade for an upcoming stage, or to help defeat the numerous Hammer Bros patrolling the overworld, which is also another new feature introduced. Each time you complete a level or lose a life, the Hammer Bros will move in between spaces. If you make contact with them, you'll enter a battle level, and defeating them will reward Mario with an item. An attention to detail I really like is that depending on the world or tile that you're on, it'll affect the terrain of the battle, which is pretty cool. Except if you're in World 3 and you land on the sea tile, because you have to deal with water physics, and you're pretty much guaranteed to lose a life. Now that doesn't mean there aren't secrets to uncover in the overworld. If you meet certain conditions or find a hidden path, you can stumble upon hidden toad houses that'll grant you special items. Another special toad house that occasionally spawn in are the ones where you try to match certain cards in 2 attempts. If you mess up, which you're bound to, always memorize the location of the cards and try again the next time, because thankfully the cards don't change each attempt. The other remaining secret you can uncover is the treasure ship, and to be honest, the prerequisites to spawn them in are very specific to say the least. During my playthrough, I didn't manage to spawn one in because to be honest, I was just playing the game normally. If you do manage to have it spawn in, you're rewarded with a barrage of coins, but you have to face Hammer Bros at the end. Nothing's free as they say. By now you should understand how Mario controls, although significant changes have been made this time around. The major overhaul comes with how Mario gains and utilizes his new running mechanic. At the bottom of the screen displays the P meter. By holding down the sprint button and moving in a direction, Mario will gain speed. The arrows at the bottom are meant to signify how much speed is being built up, and jumping while at full speed will allow Mario to reach further distances. By also holding down the B button, you can have Mario pick up Koopa shells and utilize them as projectiles against enemies or hard to reach blocks containing items. Now I have a question to anyone in the comments who knows this, but does Mario 3 utilize the same engine as Mario 1? Because good controls should be the gold standard for this franchise. Now your goal is to clear every level and make your way to the castle of each world. There are still the standard 8 worlds you have to traverse, but now Mario 3 has increased the amount of levels in each world by a lot. There are still fortress levels that block your path. However, the design of the fortresses have changed, like having mazes you need to solve or offering more challenges in their level design. Fortresses are also where enemies like Boos and Thwomps make their first appearance. At the end of every fortress, there'll be a battle with new enemy boss, Boom Boom, and he's a complete joke. Basically, the only strategy you need to employ is to jump on his head 3 times. Sometimes Boom Boom will change things up and charge at you or use wings to glide on top of you. When you jump on him, he'll reset his pattern and duck into his shell, but as long as you don't let him move, Boom Boom can be beaten very easily. When you arrive at the world's castle, you discover that the king has been turned into an animal, and some of these transformations are pretty terrifying if it happened to you. Like World 2's king is transformed into a spider, but then you have World 6 kings, who looks to be enjoying himself. Either way, once you reach the castle, you're then shown a cutscene of Mario entering the new airship levels, which adds to the final level of each world. Now the gimmick with airship levels is that they're entirely auto-scrolling, and they make their first appearance here. Because you're at the whim of the camera, you have to go at the pace of the level. In general, I'm not a fan of auto-scrollers because to be honest, I like going fast in my Mario games, and some corridors can get tight with the obstacles you have to avoid. Always be on the lookout for cannons or torches off screen because they can blindside you if you're not paying attention. Once you reach the pipe, you'll then battle with one of the Koopalings, who like many things in Mario 3 make their first appearance here. In the manual, they're stated to be Bowser's children, and this was a time before Bowser Jr. was created, so I take that statement with a grain of salt. Either way, each Koopaling will use their unique moveset combined with the magic wand to shoot projectiles at Mario. After 3 hits they're defeated, and Mario recovers the magic wand, turning the king back to normal. You're then given a letter by Peach with an item inside, and you move on to the next world. I think now is also time to bring up the new power-ups introduced in Mario 3. The most iconic power-up that features on the box art is the Tanuki Leaf. Now Mario 3 doesn't just add in this power-up because there are also a plethora of others. However, the Tanuki Leaf was featured in all the marketing for this game, so I'll talk about it first. How it works is that once you build up the P meter and press the jump button, while in midair, continuously pressing the jump button will cause Mario to fly upwards for a brief period of time. You can also press the B button to make Mario perform a spin attack, taking down enemies, and while it is neat, I much prefer to stomp on enemies instead because the tail has to connect with an enemy, and sometimes if you press it too early, the tail won't connect, causing you to lose it. Now the Tanuki Leaf does come in 2 variations, that being the Tanuki Suit and the P-Wing. The simplest way to get these is to get lucky in a Toad House or find the former in a hidden item block. The P-Wing can sometimes be given to you by Peach in her letters at the end of a world. What separates the Tanuki Suit from its variants is by pressing down on the D-pad and B, it'll cause Mario to transform into a statue, negating all damage. The inspiration behind it comes from a Japanese mythological creature called Bakidaruki, which according to legend is said to be shapeshifters who go around causing chaos. To be honest, I never found full use out of the statue form, because turning into a statue causes Mario to stop in his place, and unfortunately, the Tanuki Suit doesn't have the unique advantage the P-Wing has. What I mean by this is that while the P-Wing may look like a standard Tanuki Leaf, the P-Wing offers unlimited flight, and having that ability was insanely useful in some of the auto-scrolling levels in World 5. However, after you complete a stage, the P-Wing will revert into a standard Tanuki Leaf. When not flying, you can press the jump button repeatedly to slow your descent, and that applies to all 3 variants. Either way, I love the Tanuki Leaf in this game, and it makes it one of my favorite power-ups in the series. Other new power-ups introduced are the Frog and Hammer Bros suits. The Frog suit is only useful in underwater stages, because while on the surface, Mario's movement is nerfed and he can't run and jump like normally. While underwater, you can move in 4 directions, and to be fair, the Frog suit does fulfill its purpose, because Mario 3 completely fumbles the swimming controls. You have to press up on the D-pad while holding it in the direction you want Mario to head in, and it's just really awkward to use, making the swimming levels the worst this time around. In later worlds, Toad Houses will start carrying Hammer Bros suits, and I'm glad I can finally give enemies a taste of their own medicine. Mario will throw the hammers in a curve, so you have to take into account his positioning to land shots, but otherwise it's a great power-up you should hold on to as much as possible. There's also this green sock you can get in World 4, allowing Mario to jump higher and negate damage from the Muncher enemies, but you can only use it in the stage you find it in, so I don't consider it a true power-up. The Mushroom, Fireflower, and Starman still serves the same purpose as before, so you can rest easy knowing they're still here. Although I'm not a fan of the orange palette they chose for the Fire Mario design, that might be because I'm used to the white shirt and red overalls. There are also other items that offer secondary effects rather than augment Mario's abilities. The flute is a secret item that lets you access the warp zones, the music box will put the Hammer Bros on the map to sleep, and finally the cloud lets you skip a level. Mario 3 essentially began the series' trend of introducing new items in every new installment, which allows every game to have their own identity, and you can tell which Mario game is being played based on the power-up featured in the box art. Really, at the end of the day, I had a lot of fun playing Mario 3 for this review. From a pure gameplay perspective, Mario 3 is Mario's best adventure on the NES. The level design has more variety than previously, and the difficulty feels appropriate depending on what world you're in. In Mario 1, simplicity was always its strongest trait, but a criticism I had was that you could only do so much with what was available at the time. Now I can excuse this by saying that Super Mario Bros. Was the first game, so anything that's considered dated could be excused, which is fair. However, by Lost Levels, you could already see the problems that arose, because Lost Levels compromised by being a more difficult version of Mario 1. That being said, Mario 3 is in my opinion the easiest out of the NES games, because extra lives are easier to come by with Toad Houses and getting 3 identical cards at the end of a level. I said previously in Mario USA that game introduced the idea of having each of the worlds take on a unique aesthetic. Mario 3 would take this idea and make it a mainstay in this series, so whenever you travel to the next world, you'll be faced with different challenges, which helps complement the level design, and I think this was an excellent quality of life decision, because Mario 3 is able to create more unique set pieces like the level in World 2 when the angry sun chases Mario. World 4 Giant Land's gimmick is that the enemies are larger than normal, but in certain stages stepping through a door will revert them back to normal if you don't like the bigger enemies. Now when you arrive at World 5, it likes to trick you into thinking it's another grass area, but when you get halfway through the world you enter a tower taking you to Skyland, the real World 5. It's unique moments like those that give Mario 3 its identity. That's not to say all the worlds are created equally, mind you. I did enjoy World 6 because obviously ice physics aren't fun in platformers, and I personally didn't like the section in World 8 where the map gets dark, because otherwise the map is still linear, so its conclusion is just tedious. Mario 3 really did shape a lot of the tropes that would come with future Mario titles. Having more levels and different power-ups gives new life to the otherwise straightforward platformer genre. Super Mario Bros. 3 evolved what Super Mario Bros. Established in every single way, which is why I can see myself returning to replay Mario 3. But now the final question I have to ask is, what about the endgame, and what happens after you recover all the magic wands? After completing World 7, when you receive the letter from Peach, you discover that while Mario was away, Bowser kidnapped Peach.
Oh no! Anyway, last week...
Which takes you to World 8, and it's definitely gotten more creepier than the last time, and Bowser also sends his army to stop Mario. The first half of World 8 is going through a tank and airship level. The tank functions the exact same way as the airship levels, but you have more room for error because you're not high in the air. Right before the darkness session, you have to walk over these spaces, which if you're unlucky will grab Mario and force him to complete a shorter level. At the very least, you are rewarded with an item at the end. Going back to what I said previously about this part of World 8, the path you have to go down is still linear, so you don't have to worry about getting lost. After you arrive at Bowser's Castle once again is another maze level, but if you stick to the high ground, you should quickly make your way to him. In order to defeat Bowser this time around, when he jumps in midair to ground pound you, you have to make sure he smashes the blocks overlooking a bottomless pit. And after 3 times, the door to Peach is opened, and the princess is saved. By the way, the princess in another castle joke isn't funny. So yeah, that's Super Mario Bros. 3. I think if you're somebody who wants to try the original Mario games, I think Mario 3 is the best place to begin. Everything about the game from head to toe is a vast improvement. The level design, art style, and replayability factor makes Super Mario Bros. 3 the ultimate culmination of the NES trilogy. With that being said, the next game I'll be covering will be Super Mario World. And if you think Mario 3 is good, stay tuned for Mario World. That being said, thank you for watching, and take care.